Good evening. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm going to open with prayer and then have a few opening words, and then Ben will give a presentation tonight. Lord God, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for the families and the students that are represented here tonight. What a blessing to talk to them about college and career and their future. And really just calling their vocation, what areas you would have them go into and how to get there. Lord, we ask that you reduce anxiety as this it tends to be one of those topics. And we ask that you just provide good communication tonight and open lines for questions and answers and further opportunities to meet as we start out this process. In your name we pray, amen. If you don't know, my name is Steve Kortenhoven. I'm the high school principal. Most of you know that, or should know that. And Ben Denoy is going to be presenting. He's our college career counselor in the high school. I have maybe more importantly, I have 5 kids, and they're all have gone through this process. So not that I'm an old pro, maybe old, but not a pro, but we've been through the process. And a few words that I would say is rely on the supports that you have here with Mr. Denoy, but also the colleges that you're looking at. They want you to enroll in their school, and they're going to help you in the process. Don't be intimidated. There's a lot of weird acronyms and weird words that are only used in college applications and things like that. So you'll hear a few of those tonight, and that will clarify things. And then just commit it to prayer. There's a lot of decisions. There's a ton of schools out there. God can bless in many different environments, and you're trying to find what's best for your son or daughter in those environments. I guess the final thing is trust teenagers. They know where they can be successful. And so you have to do college visits. That's really, really important. You have to be able to understand the culture you're stepping into. And so start thinking about that. Some of you have already been on some college visits. That's awesome. But your students will get it. They'll get a feel like, no, I just can't do it here. Or, yeah, this is for me. And so do a few different college visits and ask a lot of questions in that process. So I think my kids are doing well in college and doing those things. It's a lot of it is the preparation that they've had here at Denver Christian. The support and help Mr. Denoy has provided, and as parents walking alongside them with that. So turn it over to Mr. Denoy for his presentation.
All right. I have quite a bit of information I'm going to go through tonight. So I didn't know whether to expect very few or many tonight. So if you want... if you guys want to maybe shrink to the middle section just to make it a little bit more informal, as long as you can kind of see the screen. Some of my slides have a lot more information on them than others, but Brandon, am I okay here with shadows, or do I need to stay in the spotlight? This is good? Can I move this up here? Perfect. Everybody wish Brandon King a happy birthday. He's our PAC coordinator, tech director in here. So thank you for being here. Okay, we have a few families in here. How many of you guys are the oldest student, or you're here on behalf of your oldest student? Okay, this is a brand new process. Quite a few hands, hence why you're probably here. Thank you for being here. Brandon, are we recording as well? Perfect, thank you. I've never gotten to do this in the PAC before. This is great. This is an awesome space. We've always kind of had the academic commons, and this is great. So most of you probably know me. I am Mr. Denoy, high school guidance counselor. I do a lot of college and career guidance as well as social emotional support. But it has been fun to work with students over the years and kind of see their passions and dreams take off and them to pursue those dreams. So another question I have for you is, when you think about the college planning process, this is more a question maybe for students, how does it make you feel? Excited? Do I need to bring out my emotions chart? Does anyone feel a little like nervous or anxious? Yeah, it's probably one of the biggest decisions you have yet to make in this short life of yours so far, right? And that's normal, right? You can feel excited, you can feel anxious at the same time. One of my goals in my role is to help students think about their future with excitement and joy and hope, okay? Too often I see students approach this process feeling very vulnerable, not sure of themselves, kind of anxious, right? And my goal is really to get students to allow themselves to kind of flip the script of, rather than the mindset of, man, what school's gonna accept me, right? To think more in terms of, which school am I going to allow to call me one of their alum, right? I think Denver Christian does an outstanding job of training up these young men and women, and I just love seeing them accomplish once they graduate from here. So that's my goal, is to replace that feeling of, am I worthy, right? We talked about that in chapel today. Am I good enough, right? Am I gonna measure up? Am I gonna be accepted? To where do I get, where am I gonna allow a college that I get to call home for 4 years, right? That's the goal, 4 years or less, right? But yeah, just keep that in mind, okay? This is kind of a launch into this process. My goal is, we have a sizable junior class, which I'm excited. I got a little spoiled this year with 36 seniors, so next year I have my work cut out for me. But my goal is, once we return from Discovery Week, to start meeting with juniors one-on-one and kind of get a feel for where you're at, okay? Some of you might not be ready to talk a whole lot about your plans because they're non-existent yet at this point, and that's okay. Some of you are gung-ho, probably already have a list of schools built that you're already looking at, and that's great too, right? It's really hard for me to serve everyone at the same time, but that's kind of the goal for tonight, is to make sure everyone has kind of the general baseline of, hey, here's what's coming up, right? And you can kind of go at your own pace, and I'll be there to answer those questions as they come up, okay? All right, Brandon, I think we can move to the next slide, thanks. As far as the tools that we use to assist in our college planning process, Denver Christian has a platform called SCOIR. I know it's spelled a little funky, SCOIR. And this is the main college and career planning platform that we use. Some of the things that it offers is a career interest assessment. That can be really helpful, just to look at different careers and find out, hey, maybe this is a career cluster that's I'm scoring high on, that I need to look further at some majors within that, right? There's also Principles U. It's more of a self-discovery assessment to figure out kind of how you're wired. And with that, there's a college match quiz where you can look at a host of preferences and select which preferences matter to you, okay? And obviously, the more selective you are, the shorter the amount of lists that's going to match you with, okay? But if you are pretty indifferent, you're going to get a very long list, okay? And that's okay. And that's why college visitors are so important. Once you step foot on campus, things seem a little bit more real. You get a bit of more of a feel for, hey, I really like this, or this isn't as important to me. But don't be afraid to be kind of picky, right? Like I said, though, if you're too picky, you're going to have a pretty small list to work from. But one piece of advice I like to give students is when you're thinking of all the different preferences, which we'll go through a little bit later here, sometimes it's nice to kind of rank them in terms of a must-have or a nice-to-have. And then from that list of schools that shoots out, if some of them have the nice-to-haves, that's can bump it higher on the list, okay? And also last thing I'm going to touch on with SCORE is there is an application tracker. So you can add it to your list of applying, and it just helps the school be able to track historical data as far as, it's not going to say so-and-so got into this school, but it gives me like no names, but it says, hey, this student with this GPA range and maybe these test scores, if you submit those, got into this school, right? So as DC continues to grow, as we continue to use this program more and more, it creates kind of a scattergram to give students an idea of, hey, I have a similar GPA that could be a realistic option for me, okay? For those of you who have Apple, there's also a mobile app with SCORE that I don't use myself, but I have heard that it's very user-friendly, okay? This SCORE platform is accessible to all students if you sign in through Google with your DC email using the little Google waffle. You can click on that, and then you should be able to find SCORE and do a single sign-on using the same login you use to log into Google and Gmail through your school account, okay? All right, next we're going to tackle standardized testing. I think this is probably, for juniors, this is kind of one of the primary things you're starting to think about more as we approach spring. Standardized testing, again, I guess I'll ask, how do you guys feel about standardized testing? Good, bad, or ugly? What are your thoughts? Are you excited? Probably not the right word, right? I will be honest, I have very mixed feelings about standardized testing. I understand why it exists. For a smaller school like Denver Christian, who not every class of ours is a 5.0 class, it really helps level the playing field and showcasing our students' abilities, that our students, we'll look at averages here in a minute, but how our students stack up against other students from other schools, right? It allows us to not just use GPA, right? And our students are excellent students, and I think GPA is a better indicator of college readiness than, that's the work you put in day after day, year after year, right? Versus, maybe what kind of sleep you got the night before, what you had for breakfast, what's going on in your life before you take that 4-hour test, right? So it is high stakes. Some students experience quite a bit of anxiety around that. And so I'm happy that since COVID, many schools have gone test optional, where that takes away the need to submit a standardized test score for admittance, okay? But yes, one thing that the standardized testing does is it does kind of help level the playing field in terms of relying just on GPA, okay? I've seen standardized test scores open doors for some students, okay? Some students don't decide to be a successful high school student until later in the game, right? Their second half, whatever pep talk they had, they came out in the second half and wanted to achieve, right? And at that point, if they haven't taken school very seriously, that's a tough battle to go uphill against and get that GPA raised up. So I have seen strong standardized test scores really open doors for some students that if it weren't for that score, it may not have been achievable for them to get into the school that they wanted to get into, right? But yes, I've also seen a lot of students that apply much more, I don't have to have this test score to get into this school, right? They've been incredible students their whole time at DC, and they don't have to worry about that test score. Okay? Next slide, Brandon. Standardized testing at DC. You guys all got to take the PSAT, which is the practice SAT this fall. The seniors also took both the ACT and the SAT this fall. Juniors, you will each get a chance to take each test twice, okay? Junior, you guys, your first test will be in the spring. We have March 19th slated for the ACT and April 5th slated for the SAT, okay? Spring of junior year to fall of senior year is kind of that sweet spot for standardized testing, just given like the level of math that's on the tests, and kind of, I've seen the best scores happen a lot of times summer right after junior year, and that right away senior year in the fall. Our students do extremely well on both tests. The state of Colorado is actually, in the public schools, it's an SAT state. Our students do very well in both. There are differences between the tests, but largely they're quite similar, okay? And I love to encourage juniors to take both in the spring just to get a baseline. A lot of students score very similarly, but once in a while, a student will just crush one over the other, and then you kind of know, hey, I think I'm going to focus my time and attention on this test. Like I said, they're very similar tests, but a couple of the differences, largely the biggest difference is ACT has a lot more questions. Okay, so if you don't want to worry about time management, SAT is a bit more like relaxed in terms of, I don't have quite as many questions to answer in the allotted amount of time. Okay, ACT is measured by 4 different scores to make one composite. You have the math, you have the science, you have the English, and the reading. Okay, SAT does not have a science section. Okay, so if you're really strong in science, ACT might be a good fit where it showcases that ability, can help bring up that composite. As far as the math, ACT is much more geometry and trigonometry focused. The SAT is more algebra focused. Okay, so if geometry was turned your world upside down, then maybe the SAT is something you want to check out. Okay. One of several reasons why DC continues to offer standardized testing during the school day. Okay. One, it helps us really assess our subject areas, whether our students are college ready based on the classes we're taking, right? It also, athletes understand this. It's taking it on campus during the school day is like home field advantage. I'm not going to say all anxiety goes away, right? But it's a familiar place. You don't have to wake up early on a Saturday morning and go to a strange place and take this test with hundreds or thousands. I don't know how many people show up at those national test sites, but I know that seems to me to stir up a bit more anxiety than coming to a familiar place and taking it here with your peers. So I will say, looking at national tests that our students take and tests we take here, usually our students who are taking the national tests are like really hungry to chase that score, so they do well too, but our students, I've gotten feedback that, oh, it was so nice to be able to take the test at school. So I mentioned already kind of spring of junior year through fall of senior year is really that sweet spot as far as content on the tests. So feel free, after you take the test in the spring, if you want to sign up for a summer test, that's a great time to take another stab at it and see if there's much movement in that, okay? As far as right now, don't feel like you're behind the 8 ball if you haven't been doing test prep. If you want to take a practice test for both and kind of get a baseline right now, March will be here before we know it, right? And you'll be able to take the official ACT and SAT. Please know that you don't have to share your test scores with any schools. If you take the tests, you decide which schools will have access to which scores, okay? So don't feel like, oh, I'm not sure I want to take it, because that information, it's yours unless you decide to share it with prospective schools, okay? Any questions around standardized testing? Yes. Yeah. Yep, you're right. So both tests, they're both digital now, by the way. So that's great in terms of not having near as much paperwork to try to fill out and all that. But yes, Sarah, to answer your question, there is, for both sections, there's tests without writing and then a test with writing. Okay, sometimes schools that you're looking at, I would say most of them will accept just a score, like they don't need you to have the writing score. Sometimes that may be major specific. Maybe you want to go into journalism or a writing field, right, where maybe they want to have that writing score. But the vast majority of schools will not require a writing score. Okay, but yes, you can take both. Here at school, we only offer the tests without writing, so you don't have to write an essay. Great question. I saw another hand. Yeah. Yep. Sure. I alluded to a little bit before, but with test optional, initially with COVID, people couldn't get to testing centers. They couldn't do that with this distancing stuff, right? And schools, there were quite a few schools who were considering, is standardized testing necessary or a effective means of measuring college readiness? There were a few on the fence, and then COVID kind of pushed them off the fence and forced them to, well, I guess we'll try this, right? And there's a lot of schools that decided, hey, yeah, we're not sure that standardized testing is necessary, right? So test optional became a thing. Test optional, like it suggests, you have the option of submitting your test scores, okay? Like I said, some students have an outstanding GPA, and to have a test score that's more attractive than that GPA might be really hard to do, right? So those students really don't need to submit test scores to strengthen their application. But if you have like a GPA of, still a great GPA, but 3.5, and you have like over a 30 on the ACT, it would be really good to submit that, right? That strengthens your application. There are concordance tables that kind of show this score kind of matches this GPA, where you can kind of decide, hey, what's the more attractive number, right? So with test optional, they cannot require you to submit one to gain acceptance to the school. The caveat to that is some schools will require you to submit a test score to be eligible for merit scholarships, okay? That probably is a bit more common with private schools where they won't require it to gain acceptance to the school, but if you want to be considered for merit scholarships, they need to see test scores. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
So you take a test twice, like at ACT, and you allow a school access to that. Can you pick which one if you do well on one and not the other, or do they get an average? Do they get
Yeah. So it varies based on school. Some schools will allow for a super score. So let's say you take the test twice and you really do well in math and science on one and really well in the reading and English on the other. Schools that super score will allow you to take the best of both tests and create a super score from those 4 best test subject areas, right? Some schools require, hey, if you're going to submit anything, you have to submit the whole test, right? It varies school to school, but obviously if it's to your advantage where, hey, you know what, I'm going to give you access to both because that's going to create a super score. Not every school does that, but does that answer your question? Thank you. Anything else? All right, we're going to keep moving here to building your, actually, before I move on, I'm sorry. I think we're good there. Actually, yeah, building your college list. I talked earlier about how SCORE has a tool that will allow you to look through preferences. Can I take this? I think it's like a few-minute quiz just to ask you questions of what's important to you. You select those. It gives you a list. There's so many things to consider. Sometimes our students from Colorado are a little bit soft when it comes to weather. Right, we're spoiled with the sun and moderate temperatures, pre-global warming. But geography is a big deal, right? Some students want to get as far away from home as possible. Some students want to stay as close as possible, right? Some students feel like, hey, you know what? I've lived by the mountains my whole life. I need to get to a beach, right? And some students can't imagine living apart from the mountains. So geography plays a big role in that. Weather, obviously, sunshine, we love sunshine here. Surroundings is a big deal, the size, where the campus is located. If you've never experienced anything other than the city of Denver, like a small rural town might be a little bit of a culture shock, right? But yeah, there's tons of great schools in all of the different settings, okay? So don't rule something out just because, well, I've never been there, but that doesn't sound good, right? Visit as many types of schools as you can just to have a well-rounded view of what they feel like, okay? You might appreciate something there that you initially don't know that you would, okay? So I'll get into that a bit more. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to have maybe a large list of things you'd like, and it might require you to put them in categories and maybe assign scores of 1, 2, 3. Like 1's a must-have, 2 is I think I need, 3 is it'd be nice to have, right? And the things that rise to the top as I absolutely need this, that should guide your list greatly. I think one of the most important things in terms of building a college list, I want you to find a place that's going to grow you, okay? People's faith can grow wherever God has you. I would love to see students pursue Christian higher education, but not everyone does, right? And there's opportunities to grow your faith everywhere, but you will need to own that and to pursue that, right? So Part of that is knowing yourself, where, hey, do I want to choose a school that's built in, right? My professors are going to be teaching through Christian education. They're gonna care about my faith development and be able to talk to me about that. They might even pray for me, right? There'll be Christian schools have chapels on campus, right? And different things you can attend, service trips you can do, right? Some of those things are available on public universities, but it takes a lot more intentionality to pursue those. Okay, so that's a question to ask yourself, and that ultimately I want our students to end up somewhere that's going to care well for them. Okay. After that, parents, you might join me in finding a school you guys can afford, right? That's a big deal, right? And the other thing, just as important, is finding one that's an academic fit. You want to find something that's going to challenge you and grow you, because you go to college to get a degree so that you can become more employable, right? So you don't want to go to a school that's just going to be a cakewalk and say, okay, I did the courses and it was easy, now hire me, right? You want to find a school that's, the professors are going to challenge you and help you actually learn things you haven't learned before, right? And then there's schools that are like on steroids, where it's like, oh boy, I don't just live and breathe that one thing that I would be going and majoring in, right? So part of that, you'll learn that through how you identify academic fit is knowing, hey, here's my GPA, here's maybe my test scores, and then each school has a middle 50%, where you can Google middle 50% ACT score, this school, okay? And they'll give you a range, okay? And what that means is that of the last year's incoming freshmen, 50% of them had scores that fell within that range, okay? If your score's not in there, don't freak out, because 25% of students that got accepted, their score was below that, right? But there's also 25% of students whose score was above that, okay? So while that is very useful, it gives you a range, it's not as cut and dry, right? So as far as building a list, some students I've seen know since they were 5 years old where they're going, right? Their parents had them in onesies for this school, right? And even if you're 99% sure you're going to this one school, I would encourage you to still apply to more, okay? I think 5 is a great number. You can do more, you can do less, but the bulk of the schools you apply to should be a match school. And what I mean by that is that your GPA falls within that middle 50%, okay? With that, it's very likely that you would be accepted. It's not a lock, but it's very likely, okay? And ultimately, you want to apply to schools that you're going to be accepted to. Don't be afraid to apply to schools that do say no. Okay, you never know what your ceiling is if you don't reach it, right? So the counselor in me loves to see students apply to a school and have one of them say no, because learning rejection is such a valuable tool in life that if you don't learn it now, you're going to learn it probably sooner than you want, okay? So it'll be okay. I tell students sometimes, you might not date the first person you want to date, right? You might not get your first job. You might not get your first house. There's a whole lot of things in life that are coming down the pipe that might not go your way, and that's okay. God's still in control of that. But the sooner we learn to take rejection in stride, the better off we're going to be as adults. All right, I think I'm ready for the next. I talked about cost. One thing when you're comparing cost, is just to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Some of these colleges are really tricky and they're sneaky. They know how to kind of maybe use information in a way that is attractive, right? So I know these words are tiny here, so I will send this slide deck out to you guys later too. But one thing I've noticed when even just looking and comparing the cost of schools in Colorado is some of these schools post their tuition costs. Some of them post like a credit hour versus per class, right? So most classes are going to be 3 credits. So just make sure when you're comparing costs that it's comparing apples to apples and it's the same thing, all right? Schools are obviously on their websites, they're going to post the most appealing number to the consumer. So just be aware of that. Financial aid, one thing to keep in mind with that is financial aid includes loans. Okay, I think a misconception is that financial aid is, is assistance that, I don't have to ever, that's like free money, okay? But financial aid, by definition, includes loans, which you do have to pay back, okay? And another thing is each school will have this thing called a net price calculator. That can be really helpful, but it's not always completely accurate, okay? Sometimes different institutions use different info or formulas to calculate net price. Some don't always include merit-based aid or like skill-based scholarships. If you get like an academic or music or drama, whatever scholarship, doesn't always factor that in. So don't take that as gospel truth, okay? When you're comparing cost, going to the website itself, at the very least using a consistent search tool. Any questions on that? I know that's a big topic, yes.
So when you go on visits, can you meet with a financial aid person at that point before you even decide to apply, or do you need to be accepted?
Yeah, so I mean they're not gonna give you a full-fledged package as far as here's what you would owe, but they'd be able to help you get a better idea of, hey, here's what it would cost, right? Based on what's your GPA, do you have test scores you're submitting, what have you been involved in, what maybe what major you're considering. They can kind of guide you to different scholarships and stuff that way as well, but they should be able to give you a ballpark. But they're not, one piece that they're gonna need is the FAFSA, okay? And that's, every student that's going to college really should fill that out. Parents will fill that out with you, and you fill that out each year. That gives you this number that colleges look at, and it kind of puts you into a bracket of knowing, hey, here's about how much you can expect to pay out of pocket versus how much aid you might qualify for. Okay? Yes. Yeah. Yep. My hope, I think the plan is to move it back to October 1st. Yep. Yeah, so this year, the FAFSA used to be a punishment, right? It was so long and verbose, and people were like, what is it? What are they even asking, right? So they did a major overhaul on it this year, and instead of October 1st when it usually opens, they pushed it back, I think December 31st is when they launched it, but they shrunk the questions down drastically, and their goal was to make it easier to fill out, but also more accessible to students, right? And it used to be to qualify for for financial aid, there was like criteria you had to meet, right? And certain student groups didn't qualify for that. So it was supposed to be more accessible to all, and in the process, hopefully easier and less painful to fill out. Okay? Next slide, Brandon. Another piece of information, this was numbers I got from last year, so these may not be exactly for this year, but one thing I encourage students and parents to consider is don't just go by sticker price. Sometimes there's that sticker price shock. You're like, that costs what? And then you don't even like look into that as an option, right? Generally speaking, private schools do offer more financial aid scholarships than state universities, okay? Granted, state universities' sticker price are a lot lower. There's just, private schools have a lot more money and funds, endowment, different opportunities to provide more substantial scholarships for the right students, right? Sometimes students who maybe don't have as great of GPAs probably end up paying quite a bit more than you would than going to a state university. But this infographic just kind of shows looking at the average net price, which is what students actually pay. Those numbers are a lot closer together than what the sticker price starts out as. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Yes? Yeah, not sure about that particular situation, but a lot of schools have rules around being able to stack scholarships. So maybe you have an academic scholarship that gives you a full ride, meaning you don't pay any tuition. If you have an academic scholarship that does that, and then like an athletic scholarship, they may not give you free room and board, right? They might just say, hey, you can max your scholarships until you reach the full ride of tuition-wise, but it's still there's still a cost of living associated with attending this school, right? So different schools have different rules, but yes, sometimes, yeah, they won't allow you to stack on top of where going to college will be absolutely free. Some schools will provide that, but does that answer your question? All right, we're moving right along. Next slide, please. In-state tuition, you probably already noticed, is a lot cheaper than out-of-state tuition, but there is a fun Western undergraduate exchange. WUI is a lot more fun to say, but it's an agreement with the Wild West out here, with the schools, state universities, to provide more affordable tuition. Even though you don't live in that state, they offer resident tuition times 150% or less. Okay, so I chose University of Arizona, for example. Okay, if you, being out of state, their out-of-state tuition was right around $35,000, okay, for tuition. In-state is only $11,300. Okay, for you as a Coloradan, would cost you about $17,000. Okay, so definitely much, much cheaper than out-of-state, but a little bit more than in-state. So that's an agreement with a bunch of the western side of the U.S. that they offer reduced non-resident tuition to residents in the West and kind of have developed that partnership. Okay, so check that out. Okay, next slide, Brandon. As far as next year, I would encourage you guys all, and when it comes to time to apply to schools, check out the Common App, okay? This is going to be such a time saver, okay? As the name suggests, you fill out one college application, okay? If you asked our current seniors how long a college application takes, you're going to get a lot of different answers, right? But the fact is that you fill it out once versus having to fill one out for each school you apply to. It's great that you can just fill out one, and then once you have that filled out, you can select which Common App partner schools you want to give access to your application. Okay, not every school is on the Common App, and that's okay. But a lot of schools are, and especially if your list has, several Common App schools, definitely encourage you to submit through there. I request that a bit selfishly because it makes my job a lot easier to submit one transcript for all those schools rather than risking the chance of getting a paper cut on my tongue, sending them to several schools, okay? So I can upload a digital copy of that official transcript once, and every school you apply to has access to that, okay? Same thing for letters of recommendation, whether that's from teachers or coaches. As you fill out your application, it will ask you for an email address of your recommender. Okay, some of them require a counselor recommendation. I do ask to start thinking about which teachers, pastors, youth pastors, coaches, fill in the blank, know you the best, okay, and could speak to you really, really well in terms of allowing a college to get to know you in a deeper way other than just looking at your grades, right? Find someone who knows you, can be honest. You're not looking for someone that's just going to put fluff. They want something substantial, right? College admissions reps have been doing this a while. They can tell when a recommendation has been written that, wonder how many people this has been submitted for, right? Versus they can actually speak to you personally. Start thinking about that and ask them maybe even before senior year starts. Hey, I've been thinking, would you be willing to write a recommendation for me next year when I'm ready to apply for schools, right? Just to get it on their forefront of their brains, especially for you guys that have a large class. The last thing I want is for all 60-something of you to ask the same teachers 2 weeks before you're applying to your schools all at once, because that will not allow them enough time to do you justice, okay? So the earlier you can ask, the better. I would ask that you do the same for me when you need me to submit transcripts, and you may not realize the schools you're applying to require a counselor recommendation, but I take that really seriously too. And it's my standard procedure when I get a notification that, hey, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. I don't get a notification that the school you apply to needs a counselor recommendation unless I go in and click and review each school. So if you see that, I need you to give me a heads up, because I can't track 60-some students and click through all of them, and I love attention to detail, but I don't want to drop the ball. So I'm asking you to please give me a heads up of, hey, Mr. Denoy, add this school. I applied to them. They do need a counselor recommendation. I would ask that be well in advance of your deadline so I have enough time to get that written too. Okay? Any questions there? August 1st. At least historically, that has been the date. Okay? That's when applications open and you can start filling that out and submitting. Yep. Any other questions with a Common App? Yes. Yep. So yeah, make sure you research that too, and I can send out information about the kind of the technical terms, but there are priority deadlines where early decision is kind of the biggest one to just be aware of what you're doing there, because that is binding. Okay, so early decision, if you're I'm super, super sure I love this school, and it's my number one choice. And if I can get into there, I'm going there in a heartbeat, right? Early decision may be a school you want to check out, especially if, you know what, my academic fit kind of places me as, that's kind of a reach school. My GPA is kind of on the lower end of that middle 50, where it's not a guarantee. If I apply early decision, that maybe bumps me up in terms of the pile of applications where, you know, I'm really serious about this. Demonstrated interest is another term where you've visited, you've attended some of their previews or whatever that may be. Maybe you've done an interview with them or something, right? Where that shows, hey, I'm very serious about this school. Applying early can kind of further that demonstrated interest, okay? But yeah, keep in mind, if you are to get accepted, they're going to require you to drop all of your other applications. And there's a whole agreement you have to sign off that you understand those terms and everything. So, okay, that's early decision. Early action or priority deadlines is non-binding, but that still bumps up. A lot of times that's like November, maybe like November 15th or October 1st, where that's an early action where it's not binding, but it still shows, hey, I want to submit my application and find out before the rest of everyone else applies for the regular decision. That can still, you can kind of find out earlier that way. So if you know, some schools a lot of times they'll defer you. If they don't say yes, they'll defer you to the regular application deadline, where then they'll make another decision later once they've thrown your application into the stack with everyone else. Does that make sense? Okay, so they might defer, they might wait list, where, you know, once they find out how many students they can actually accept, they go to the wait list pile and choose the top candidates from that pile. Okay? There's a lot of terminology, but usually I feel like Common App does prevent you from just clicking away and be like, are you sure you understand what that means? So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. This Common App, you can go to the next slide, Brandon. There's a lot of clickable things in here, and again, I can send this out. Common App has a lot of guides, kind of walking you through this, the whole process. As far as writing an essay, Common App will have a essay prompt for you to write. Usually they have at least 7, and one of them is basically create your own, right? Where maybe you've already written it for a paper that you did, and you just need to adapt that to serve as your application essay. As far as guiding students in the application process or writing their college essay, the question I like to ask is, what is your deepest story? Okay. Now, some students get that confused with, I have to have gone through this like epic battle or struggle where I've overcome this huge obstacle. And it's not a comparison game of like comparing scars or battle wounds. Like, just be authentic. Show depth and be honest. Schools want to see, like, what kind of student are you? How are you going to contribute to our community? Okay? So be authentic. If you've gone through something that's a big deal to you, write about it, right? Don't compare yourself to, oh, well, I haven't overcome this, or I didn't, like, you know, don't play the comparison game. So yeah, think about that. What is my deepest story? Okay. And then as you're writing, there's an essay that you can write that you can submit on Common App that all schools will access. Okay. But then there's supplemental essays. Some schools will ask for a supplemental essay, and that's an essay that you write that's specific to that school. Like, why do you want to apply to, like, University of Arizona? I used that earlier, right? Like, why specifically us? Okay, so obviously you write those. That will just go to that school. Does that make sense? The difference there. Okay. I think we're doing well. I think we'll go to the next slide to timelines. Okay, senior year. I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're going to work from the future back to present, okay? Senior year, ultimately we want students to choose their path. There's a lot of paths to choose. Some students pursue a traditional 4-year bachelor's. Some students aren't really sure where they want to go to school, but they want to keep their education moving. And so sometimes they choose to go to a 2-year school just to get kind of their some core credits out of the way, right? And get those done so they can keep making progress, but they haven't committed to a specific school yet, okay? And sometimes in that span, they gain a bit more clarity, which brings them to their ultimate destination. Some students want to take a gap year. I prefer the term bridge year. That seems a little bit more intentional and directive, like bringing you to the next phase in life. Gaps sometimes end up being several years or decades, right? So ultimately, I don't want you guys to feel like college is the expectation for you, okay? Some students know, hey, you know what? What I want to do, I don't need a degree for it, right? And that's great. I encourage that as well. Denver Christian is a college prep high school, meaning that we prepare you to be successful if you choose to pursue a college degree, but it is not the expectation, okay? More and more students since COVID, I feel like, have expressed interest in trade schools and learning a trade. That has become wildly popular. Warren Tech is one of those schools that's in Jeffco that right after COVID, there was a waiting list for almost every program they had, but that is something that our students consider. Military, we haven't had anyone super recently, but there's always, at some point, there's always a group in high school that are considering that, right? And opportunities that might create. So there's a lot of different paths. Some students pursue and get some work experience, maybe pursue an internship before kind of signing up to take classes and pursuing a degree in that field. So you'll learn more. I'll send more information out about the FAFSA next fall as we get closer to that. You don't have to worry about that yet, okay? As far as junior year, you guys already took the PSAT. Sorry, I jumped a couple there. Great. We are working on solidifying a group college visit to Colorado Christian University. I'm looking right away when we get back from Discovery Week, like right away at the start of third term. And why we do that, I don't want you guys to feel like we're trying to push you guys to go to Colorado Christian University. It's a great school. It's down the road. They've partnered well with us in offering dual credit for our students. But it's convenient. They're a great school. And our purpose in doing that is allowing you all to experience what a college visit looks like. Okay, some of you have already done that, and that's great. Even if you're not considering going, you might learn, hey, that's important to me. Maybe not here, but I want that somewhere else, right? So that's the purpose. That's why we do that, so that everyone has an opportunity to know what a college visit looks like, okay? once you guys take the ACT and SAT, you'll have kind of a baseline of where your scores are at to know, hey, you know what? This isn't going to measure up to my GPA. I don't need to really worry about testing versus I did really well at this. I think if I put in a little time and effort, I can raise that and enhance my application. And I'm happy to walk you through that and help you make decisions about, hey, here's my scores. What do you suggest, right? It's good to have a goal in mind. I've seen students just test and test and test and test relentlessly. I'm like, what are you hoping to accomplish? And it's good to have, here's my goal. Once I reach that, then we're good, right? I think sometimes students can stress out. And when you're worried about testing, you miss out on senior year. And I don't want to see you guys do that, okay? We have college recruiters and college fairs at Denver Christian. We have the bigger one that's coming up is March 4th. It's the Denver area Christian College Fair, where we will have Christian schools from all over the nation come and set up in our cafe. I will actually probably be in here or upstairs in the cafeteria, depending on the number of schools. But we'll have people from the community come and visit as well. But I would love to see a strong showing of our students there. But yeah, we have campus visitors from college reps throughout the year. Juniors, I would love if this spring, if you guys step up and kind of take over. Hey, you know what? Our seniors probably mostly know where they're going. It's our turn. We rely on our students to maintain those relationships with those college reps, because even if you're not interested in that college, you can do your part in welcoming them, thanking them for being here so that they come back for future students who may be interested in that school, right? Just like I think you would appreciate students doing the same for you for maybe a school that you're interested in that no one else is. It's all about maintaining those relationships, okay, and representing our school and God well. We are almost done. You guys have been great. I've already talked about fit factors, ACT, SAT. Couple things. Two more things here. Think about how you're going to use your summer. Okay. Sometimes I see students not really care about college application and college readiness until senior year. Junior year is a great time for you to pursue an experience that aligns with something you are passionate about. Some students get a job, and that's great. But this is kind of your last summer before, if you end up going to college, you're going to be using that summer to make money and save up, right? But just be intentional about strengthening your resume. That's not the ultimate goal. I want you to pursue things that matter to you, not just on paper, but that speak to who you are, right? But I think that's really good. The strongest resumes stand out in the workforce, and you are building that resume in your college application as well. Okay, start thinking about essay topics. Start massaging your list of schools. Do some visits if you can. Obviously, it's best to visit schools when they're in session. You get a little bit more accurate idea of what that campus feels like when there's students on it. But sometimes summer is the time you have available to at least get on campus, right? And see what the buildings feel like and the dorms look like and those different types of things. Summer is also a more fun time to visit than in the winter, where things are dead and you just get a bit more of an idea of what campus might feel like, okay? That is all I have for that. My main As far as college application essays, my main resource that I promote is the College Essay Guy. If you Google the College Essay Guy, he has so many resources available. Ethan Sawyer is his name, and he's dedicated his life to helping high school students apply to schools, write those essays. You can just tell his passion in the videos he does and exercises he does as well. So check that out. That is all I have for tonight. Any other final questions? We covered it all. Yeah.
Would you say that there is, I mean, just speaking about seeing the colleges while they're in session versus the summer, do you think that there's merit to going, a lot of colleges offer like a 5-day, come on campus and hang out and meet students during the summer? I mean, would you say that that's something students should do, especially if it's like out of state?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a fairly big commitment, so I wouldn't do that unless you're really feeling strongly about that school. Okay. I would encourage you, just even if you're doing a vacation, like just go visit schools in that area, or if it's on your list, if you can get there, see it in person, and if that's like, ooh, I liked that, I would love to go back and see maybe in the early fall when it's back in session, see what it feels like with students. But a lot of times you can get a pretty good sense of, hey, you know what, that moves on to the next round. I want to give that another visit later. Yeah, does that make sense? Anything else? All right. Again, feel free to email me if you have questions. I know you'll probably have more questions as you get closer to application time, but yes.
Sorry, I was thinking about the March 4th, you said. Do you have a list of the colleges that will be there?
I will shortly. The fair coordinators have been in contact with me. They are just getting that out and having that list grows each day. So usually we have around, I would say, 25 to 30 different colleges. Sometimes more, but that's, the very minimum. We will be right at 25 at least. Yep.
In the same vein, do you have a list of schools that maybe Denver Christian kids have gone to?
I do. Yep. Yeah, you guys are welcome to pick up one of those. This is on our school profile, and thank you for asking that, because the purpose of the school profile, other than it looks beautiful, it allows colleges to learn more about Denver Christian. Okay, so I submit this to the Common App every year after I update it, and schools can see how many 5.0 classes we offer, right? So if they look at the transcript and see, gosh, they took 80% of the classes they offered that are 5.0, that shows that the student is pretty rigorous, right? They took every opportunity they could, right? So it gives context around our students' transcripts and helps them understand them a bit more rather than just looking at the numbers, okay? And on the back of here, it has the last 4 years of schools that our students have been accepted to and also matriculated to, and that's in bold. That's so fun to update every year. Yes? So, yes, Bethel has, I don't want to misspeak, but yes, Bethel has partnered with us. We have some dual credit opportunities with them, but also being a partner school, they have been very generous with tuition scholarships for our students. And I'd have to revisit what qualifications there are for that, but okay. That's pretty awesome. Yep. based on GPA. Yeah. So yeah, there are some Christian schools who have automatic scholarships for students who graduate from a Christian high school. Right? They understand that that is a commitment that parents have made. Right? So that some of them reward that with, hey, if you graduate from a Christian high school, you automatically qualify for this scholarship. So keep an eye out for that too. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, you are released for the night. Thanks for sticking with me. I know that's a lot of information. Yes, feel free to reach out with any questions. Thank you, guys.